Hello everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy's daily news analysis. Today is 18th November 2025 and today we have a list of important topics for the discussion. So the first topic is about Indian judiciary and the pendency of cases. The second topic, India-Africa relations and the potential for the growth. The third important topic is recent Supreme Court's judgment on man-wildlife conflict. So let's try and understand these topics in detail. Now before going into the main topics, based on a topic, we have a prelims practice question as well. Which one of the following statements is correct with respect to fundamental rights, particularly with respect to Article 32 of the Indian Constitution? Now we all knew that Article 32 of the Indian Constitution, it deals with the right to constitutional remedies. Now in this context, so let's try to answer this question, and please comment the correct answer in the comment section, and we'll be providing the correct answer in tomorrow's class. And without any further delay, let's discuss the first very important topic. This topic is the lower judiciary, litigation, pendency and stagnation of cases. Let's understand this, and this topic has been given in the Hindu newspaper, and from the syllabus point of view, this is very important for General Studies paper 3, and the syllabus has been given here. Now let's understand the context of this topic. The context is that in Indian judiciary, particularly the lower judiciary, there is a huge pendency of cases, right? So therefore, we can conclusively say that Indian justice delivery system, so it has been facing a lot of challenges. In fact, one such challenge is a huge pendency of cases. Now, apart from this, there are procedural delays and even structural weaknesses in the subordinate judiciary. So therefore, essentially, we need to highlight three main problems that the Indian judiciary has been facing, particularly the lower judiciary. One is the pendency of the cases. Second problem is procedural delays, and third is structural weaknesses in the subordinate judiciary. Now, in fact, according to an estimate, so crores of cases have been pending in the district courts all across the country. So there is a huge pendency, huge burden on the judiciary with respect to pendency of the cases. However, we can say that this district courts actually form the backbone of the Indian judicial hierarchy. So despite they are being the backbone of the judicial hierarchy, the problem is there is a huge pendency of the cases in the lower judiciary. So I hope you have understood the main problems that the lower judiciary has been facing. However, recently Supreme Court has made some important observations with respect to pendency of cases. Now in fact, the Supreme Court has highlighted a stagnation in the stagnation of cases in the lower judiciary, and it has been aggravated by judges lacking basic training and experience to deal with these number of cases, and that could be one reason for increasing the pendency of cases. However, to address this crisis, what needs to be done? To address this crisis, a targeted structural reforms which are need of the hour, including improved training frameworks and modernization of the procedural laws, right? So however, the key context of this particular topic is a huge pendency of cases in the lower judiciary. So there are number of reasons for huge pendency of cases, but Supreme Court has highlighted that lack of basic training and experience is one of the reason for the pendency of the cases in the lower judiciary, particularly in the district courts. So therefore, what needs to be done to address this problem? To address this problem, there is a need for a targeted structural reforms, and apart from that, provide training frameworks and also modernization of procedural laws. So these could be the ways to reform the lower judiciary, reduce the pendency of the cases and increase their efficiency. And with respect to the pending cases across different levels, so you can also refer this data as well. In Supreme Court, around 54,000 cases are pending. In High Courts, 43 lakh cases are pending across the country. In subordinate courts, 2.76 crore cases have been pending all across the country. However, if you look at the number of judges in India per 1 million population, so in India it is just 17 judges for 1 million population, but in UK it is 51 judges for 1 million and US 107 judges per million population. So this is how there is a lack of adequate number of judges to dispose of cases, and that leads to increasing pendency and increasing burden on the lower judiciary. Now let's understand the key obstacles to efficiency in subordinate courts. Right? So what are the key obstacles to efficiency in subordinate courts? So there are some obstacles, there are some challenges. So we have to understand those challenges. The first most important challenge is excessive clerical workload, and this excessive clerical workload is imposed on the judges. Now this is one of the main obstacle to increase efficiency of the lower judiciary. Right? So if you increase this excessive clerical workload on the judges, now judges will not be able to dispose of cases as expected. This is the first problem. Now the second most important issue, so we'll understand that as well. So however, the Criminal Procedure Code, Code of Civil Procedure and Civic Rules of Practice. So under this, judges must call every suit, issue summons, receive wakaltanamas, and also handle routine filings as well. Don't you think that this is all part of the clerical workload that judges have? Now when judges have so much burden, so much of clerical work, they may not be able to dispose of cases as quickly as possible, and that would further result in increasing the caseload. Right? So therefore, these tasks that we have discussed, that issuing summons, call every suit, receiving wakaltanamas, handling the routine filings, so they actually occupy the morning hours. Now morning hours are also considered as a very crucial and very important hours, ranging from 10:30 a.m. to afternoon. So therefore, these procedural aspects, they are occupying the crucial morning hours, leaving judges with a very less or minimal time for hearing cases or even writing judgments. Now at this point of time, increasing clerical workload on the judges, and that too during the crucial morning hours, you cannot expect judges to dispose of cases as quickly as possible, because they are increasingly occupied with the clerical work that they have to perform. And apart from that, the misallocation of judicial time also contributes directly to the case pendency. This is another major problem that Indian judiciary has been facing. Right? So very often there existing a judicial time, but this judicial time is misallocated. However, a practical solution is appointment of a dedicated judicial officer at the lower rank. And in fact, every district should have a dedicated judicial officer to perform the ministerial functions for all courts of a particular cadre. So this could be one practical solution where the judiciary could improve its performance, improve its efficiency when it comes to disposing of cases and reducing pendency on it, because such a practical solution would reduce the clerical workload imposed on the judges. So therefore, such a system would free subordinate judges from the clerical tasks and substantially improve their productivity, and case disposal will be increased and pendency of the cases can also be reduced. So what solution we have been talking about? The solution is appointment of a dedicated judicial officer. This dedicated judicial officer will be looking into this clerical tasks, so that the subordinate judges will not have so much burden of performing the clerical works, and they just focus on disposing of the pending cases. I hope it is clear. Now let's understand the judicial competence and the need for training to the judges. Now it is also very important that judges need to be provided training to make them more and more competent and make them more efficient when it comes to disposing of cases as effectively, as efficiently as possible. Right? So let's understand that another most important challenge, another pressing challenge when it comes to the pendency of the cases at the subordinate judiciary is a decline in the experience and preparedness of the newly appointed judges. Now, for example, imagine that a judge who is newly appointed. Now, he requires experience and he also takes a lot of time to accommodate himself to the new conditions, right? So this could be another major challenge when it comes to disposing of cases as effectively, as quickly as possible. However, traditionally there are district munsifs, magistrates, so they were selected from the lawyers with a decade or more practice under the senior advocates. So therefore, when experienced lawyers are selected for the purpose of district munsif and magistrates, so since they have adequate amount of experience, it ensures familiarity with the courtroom dynamics and even the legal reasoning as well, so that we can significantly reduce the time that is required for acquiring experience and also the preparedness of newly appointed judges. So already experienced judges, lawyers can be appointed as a judges at the lower judiciary. However, as of now, if you look at how judges are being appointed at the subordinate judiciary, so they enter directly from the law school with a very little exposure to a real litigation. Since they have a very little exposure to real litigation, what problem it can generate? It can generate that judges may not have the familiarity with the courtroom dynamics, judges may not have the experience, and judges will also take a lot of time to prepare themselves, to accommodate themselves with, to acquaint themselves with the courtroom dynamics. So therefore, this could be another major issue here. However, the remedy to this, so you can appoint new judges directly from the law school, but there is a need for mandatory training at the high court benches. Every judge who is newly appointed, there is a need for mandatory training for new judges in high court benches, where the newly appointed judges can observe the proceedings which have been taking place, understanding the judicial conduct, and even study how orders are drafted by the courts. So this observation and experience is very, very important for the efficient functioning and performance of the judges at the subordinate level. Now, in fact, the observation that whatever observation that the subordinate judges, newly appointed subordinate judges have made would significantly strengthen the subordinate judiciary's competence and improve the quality of decision making as well. So overall, the objective is improving the quality of decision making, reducing the burden on the judiciary, reducing the pendency of the cases, increasing the overall efficiency of the judiciary so that justice can be delivered on time to the people. So therefore, all these things have to be done. However, in this context, what is the role for the higher judiciary? Now, we have been discussing that the subordinate judiciary have some issues with respect to the pendency of cases, delivering justice, or disposing of the cases. Now, what role that higher judiciary can perform in this context? Now, in this context, reducing pendency alone or not solely the responsibility of the subordinate courts alone. Now, in this matter, so high courts must also ensure timely disposal of appeals and revisions as well. Now, in fact, it is the responsibility of the entire judiciary to come up with practical solutions to address the problem of pendency of cases. It is not the sole responsibility of the subordinate judiciary. It is not the sole responsibility of the higher judiciary. Now, in this context, the objective should be reasonable termination of proceedings rather than hastening the commencement of the new ones. Right? So, what reforms are actually required to improve the efficiency of the subordinate judiciary? Now, first thing that is required, there is a need to modernize the procedural law to eliminate the outdated steps. Right? So, modernization of the procedural law. Second one is recruitment standards need to be improved. Now, when I say recruitment standards need to be improved, there is a need to select experienced lawyers as judges, and even if new candidates are being appointed as judges, there is a need for mandatory training in the respective high courts. So through observation, they can gain a crucial experience, and that will help in disposing of cases. And apart from that, there is a need for a comprehensive and mandatory training for the judges at the entry level. So this has to be done. And apart from that, simplifying the execution mechanisms to ensure decrees have a real enforceability as well. So these are the reforms required to reduce the pendency of the cases, and in fact both higher judiciary and the lower judiciary should come together, and they need to work in hand to reduce the burden of the pendency of cases. However, without actually adopting these interventions, these reforms, pendency will continue to increase, and public confidence, public trust over the justice system will continue to erode. So therefore, this is high time that the judiciary must think of reforming the judiciary within to reduce the pendency of the cases, to reduce the burden on the judiciary, and also to increase its overall efficiency when it comes to delivering justice. So I hope this is clear for you. And a next very important topic is India-Africa relations, and this topic has been given in the Hindu newspaper, and from the syllabus point of view, this is very important for General Studies paper 2, and you can also go through the syllabus as well. So let's understand India-Africa relations in detail and what is its potential. Now, in fact, a decade has passed since New Delhi has hosted third India-Africa Forum Summit, because the last time that New Delhi hosted India-Africa Forum Summit was in the year 2015. And about this India-Africa Forum Summit also, UPSC has asked a prelims question in 2016. However, the India-Africa Forum Summit is considered as a landmark and a significant event, because this event has symbolized the transformative shift in India's diplomatic vision. So India has understood, identified the potential of Africa, and that potential, and in fact that transformative shift has been reflected through India-Africa Forum Summit that was held in the year 2015. Now, in fact, in this third India-Africa Forum Summit, right? Remember, this is third India-Africa Forum Summit that was held in the year 2015. And in this India-Africa Forum Summit, the representatives of all 54 African nations. So India, they have signaled its ambition to elevate the relationship into a continent-wide strategic partnership. Right? So in the very same Forum Summit, India clearly signaled an ambition. India wanted to strengthen its bilateral relations, its strategic partnership with the entire African continent. Right? So in fact, the years since have seen increasing trade between India and the African continent as a whole. And there are expanding education networks, new missions have been started, and in fact a greater political alignment as well between India and Africa. However, despite So all these positives, yet they have also revealed a persistent challenge, which demands new solutions from both these African continent as well as India. There are a lot of challenges as well. So no doubt that India-Africa relations both have a lot of potential. But at the same time, there are persistent challenges also. The challenges demand new solutions from both partners. Now, in fact, India is now the third largest economy in terms of purchasing power parity, but India is fourth largest economy in terms of GDP. So we can categorize India as a economic heavyweight in the world. However, so Africa is known for its demographic dividend. Demographic dividend means that Africa is going to become a very good market for India. So therefore, both regions stand on the threshold of a shared future, and this shared future required coordinated and co-created action from the African region and India as well. So now let's understand the features of Indo-Africa ties. So what are the major features? What are the key features before actually understanding the potential of India-Africa relations? Now, in fact, the strategic logic of India-Africa ties has strengthened considerably since India-Africa Forum Summit of 2015, because India has established 17 new diplomatic missions, and the trade between African continent as a whole and India has also surpassed 100 billion US dollars. So therefore, it has been reflecting that India has been broadening its strategic partnership and engagement with the African continent as a whole. Right? So one thing is that India has expanded its diplomatic missions. India has further expanded its cooperation with the African continent, and that has resulted in the bilateral trade surpassing $100 billion. So these advancements in India and Africa relations. So it is India's recognition of Africa's increasing global importance. Now, why I say that Africa is of a global importance? Because of demographic dividend, because of a large potential for agriculture, ensuring the global food security. It is known for a rich mineral resources, including the rare earth metals and critical minerals also. Right? So because of all these reasons, Africa is of global importance. Right? So because especially 1 in 4 people on earth will be African by the year 2040. So every 4 people on the earth, so 1 person will be from Africa by the year 2050. That means still the population would grow enormously in the African continent coming years. Now, several countries have been experiencing aging population, but at this point of time, Africa is going to see a demographic boom. Now, in fact, India is also set to become the world's third largest economy very soon. Don't you think that on the one hand, Africa has the potential in terms of its demographic dividend, and on the other hand, India is becoming an economic heavyweight? India is going to become the third largest economy very soon. So therefore, India has emerged as one of Africa's top 5 investors, because India so far invested 75 billion in cumulative investment. Now, India's investments are long-term investments. Its investments are strategic investments. India invests on capacity building of African people, and that's very important to generate trust and goodwill about India on the minds of African people. And more importantly, the model of engagement is also shifting from the traditional infrastructure projects to co-creation of high impact sectors. For example, vaccine production to ensure vaccine equity, digital tools, and even renewable technologies. So these are the key features of India-Africa relations so far, and we have also briefly understood the potential of India and Africa. Now, in this context, how India-Africa ties would compete in a changing global landscape. Let's understand this, because China is competing with India in the African continent, right? So China is also posing a significant challenges to India's influence in the African continent, right? So one major challenge that India has been facing, China remains ahead in trade and investment volumes in African continent, and this is a very well known fact, right? So China as of now remains ahead in trade and investment volumes. However, Indian companies are often hindered by limited financial scale. Yes, there is no doubt that there is a presence of Indian companies, but Indian companies have often hindered by limited financial scale, and even there are bureaucratic delays as well. So therefore, it has been creating a pressure to scale back engagement of India in African continent, and in fact an approach that would be strategically misguided, and therefore India must move up in the value chain in the African continent, and India should also compete with China in African continent in terms of investment, in terms of engagement with different countries with respect to different other aspects. However, there are the future facing sectors, for example green hydrogen, a lot of potential, electric mobility, digital infrastructure. They offer opportunity for joint innovation and leapfrogging for both India and African continent together. Now, apart from that, Africa's own transformation is accelerating through African Continental Free Trade Area, which is AFCFTA. Now, in fact, it aims to create a single continental market in the entire African continent. So therefore, it is time that India must engage with AFCFTA to further strengthen the trade and commerce relations. And in fact, India is a leader in digital payments and a digital stack, so they can complement Africa's ambitions, but tools alone are not the strategy. And apart from that, vibrant innovation hubs emerging in Kigali, Nairobi, Lagos. Now, Africa is not just a recipient of technology, but a producer of innovation as well, right? So therefore, we have certain challenges in Africa. Now, we need to understand those challenges, and we need to come up with practical solutions to overcome those challenges. And we should also focus on capacity building and strengthening India and African relations in the long term, and the focus should not be on strengthening relations in the short term, right? So let's understand a few aspects where India can engage with the African continent in a much more realistic and practical manner. Now, in fact, if India is investing, if India is financing the African projects, then there is a need to connect the finances to the real outcomes that we are going to achieve. With respect to this, there is a need for providing line of credit, and this line of credit should yield visible and high impact results. And apart from that, the public finance should serving to de-risk the private capital as well. And apart from that, there is a need to build India-Africa digital corridor as well, right? So therefore, the collaboration between India and the African continent as a whole should expand beyond the Unified Payment Interface or UPI to integrate Africa's digital strengths, and also enabling co-developed platforms for areas like healthcare, education, and payments across the global south. And there is a need to revive India-Africa Forum Summit as well, because the last time the India-Africa Forum Summit was conducted in the year 2015, that has significantly transformed India's engagement with the African continent. So therefore, there is a need to conduct another India-Africa Forum Summit to further strengthen the India-Africa bilateral relations at this point of time, right? I hope you have understood this in detail, and let's understand another very important topic. So recently, Supreme Court has held that states must actively consider notifying any human wildlife conflict as natural disaster. This is what the Supreme Court has emphasized on. It has said that human wildlife conflict should be considered as natural disaster, so that adequate safeguards would be provided for the wild animals. Now, in this context, this topic has been given in the Hindu newspaper, and from syllabus point of view, this is very important for General Studies paper 3, and even for the prelims examination also, this is very important. So let's understand what Supreme Court has said and what is the background of this particular case. Now, in one of its judgment, the Supreme Court has held that preserving India's tiger habitats. Now, in fact, the tiger reserves are established. This is very well known fact. Tiger reserves are established under the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. Under Wildlife Protection Act 1972, tiger reserves have been established. So therefore, preserving India's tiger habitats is the key aspect of Supreme Court's judgment. In fact, Supreme Court has also issued sweeping directions to curb ecological damage in tiger reserves. So it is important to protect the tigers and their habitats, and it is also important to curb the ecological damage that has been taking place in the tiger reserves. Now let's understand the background of the case in a very brief way. The background is that now the recent directions or a recent ruling of the Supreme Court, it stems from a suo motu intervention by the Supreme Court after reports of unauthorized tree felling. Right, so there has been unauthorized tree felling, deforestation, illegal construction, misuse of funds. So all these things have been surfaced within the Jim Corbett Tiger Reserve. Right, we all knew that this Jim Corbett Tiger Reserve is located in the state of Uttarakhand, but the problem in this Jim Corbett Tiger Reserve is that there is unauthorized deforestation or tree felling, illegal construction, and even misuse of funds. So all these problems have been surfaced in the Jim Corbett Tiger Reserve. However, recently court has appointed an expert committee, and the expert committee investigated the violations in the Jim Corbett Tiger Reserve and proposed a detailed recommendations for the ecological restoration within the Jim Corbett Tiger Reserve, keeping in mind all these aspects. However, the Supreme Court has accepted the committee's findings. Yes, it is true that there are illegal construction, encroachment of the forest land, misuse of the funds, and even unauthorized tree felling. And in fact, the court has also noted that tiger tourism is important for public awareness, but has often devolved into mass commercial tourism, and which is detrimental to the wildlife and forest ecosystem, which is not acceptable. Right, so Supreme Court has emphasized that this tiger tourism is important for public awareness, but the problem is that it has resulted in mass commercial tourism, and this is detrimental to the wildlife and forest ecosystem. So therefore, the judgment of the Supreme Court seeks to strike a balance between ecotourism, environment friendly tourism, protection of the local livelihoods, and even the biodiversity protection as well. So it seeks to strike a balance between all these things. So let's understand what Supreme Court has said in this particular judgment. Now, Supreme Court has held that tiger safaris only in the non-forest areas. So tiger safaris will not be allowed in the forest areas, right? So court has prohibited the tiger safaris inside the core of critical tiger habitats. Now, in these tiger reserves, there are the critical tiger habitats or the core area and the buffer area. Now, in this core area, the human activities are restricted. So therefore, the Supreme Court has emphasized that the tiger safaris must be prohibited in this core areas. directing that the tiger safaris may only be established on non-forest or degraded forest land within the buffer zone. For example, imagine that this is a tiger reserve and this is the core area, and this could be the buffer area. Core area and buffer area, and within this buffer area, a non-forest or degraded forest will be allowed for the tiger safaris. Further, such safaris must operate within association with a fully functional rescue and rehabilitation center for tigers. So therefore, it catering to the conflict animals, injured animals, and abandoned wildlife as well, right? Now, apart from that, the second thing that Supreme Court has emphasized is complete ban on night tourism and mobile use, right? Because it has been recognizing the disturbance caused by human activity, noise pollution, right? So in order to protect biodiversity, critical tiger habitats, so there should be a very minimal disturbance. However, human activities may create a lot of disturbance, the light pollution, the noise pollution, right? So therefore, the court has imposed complete ban on night tourism within the tiger reserves. In tiger reserves, night tourism will be prohibited. This is what the court has emphasized. In areas where roads pass through core tiger habitats, for example, there are some national parks, and within national parks there are tiger reserves. Through those tiger reserves also the national highways pass. The court has ordered the strict nighttime regulation, for example, prohibition of vehicular movement during the night time, and also providing some exceptions to the emergency or ambulance services. Now, Supreme Court has also talked about the eco-sensitive zone norms for the tiger reserves. For the tiger reserves, these eco-sensitive zone norms have to be applied, right? So therefore, the court has directed that eco-sensitive zones around the tiger reserves, for example, imagine that this is a tiger reserve, and around this tiger reserve it should be declared as eco-sensitive zone. So they must conform to the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change norms, right? So in fact, under this, the minimum ecological sensitive zone throughout a tiger reserve, a minimum ecologically sensitive zone area shall be equivalent to the buffer or fringe area of the tiger reserve. Now, in this ecologically sensitive zones, the human activities are regulated or restricted. Now, states were also instructed to notify the economically sensitive zone boundaries within 1 year, ensuring a uniform protection standards all across the nation, right? So this is not specific to Jim Corbett National Park, but there should be a uniform protection standards all across the country. And then it has also talked about regulation of tourism infrastructure in the buffer zones across the tiger reserve, right? So all tourism infrastructure development in buffer areas comply with the ecologically sensitive zone notification under the Environment Protection Act 1986. So therefore, the ecologically sensitive areas would be dealt under the Environment Protection Act of 1986. Right, so therefore the eco-friendly resorts may be allowed in the buffer areas or ecologically sensitive zones, but the court has emphasized that no such establishment shall be permitted in the tiger corridors, and this is very important to protect and conserve the tiger habitats, right? So apart from that, the court has also recommended promoting the community managed homestays as part of ecotourism. As part of ecotourism, the court has encouraged this, and even village-based ecotourism, thereby ensuring that conservation efforts benefit the local populations as well. So this is what the court has directed with respect to the protection of a wildlife, right? So that's all for today, and thank you so much. So please subscribe our YouTube channel and also like a video. Thank you.